Stop cleaning on Saturdays. If your house looks fine on Monday and feels like a disaster by Friday, the problem isn't your schedule. It's that you're treating mess like weather, something that builds up and then gets fought back in one exhausting session. Danish homes don't do that. There's no deep clean day, just one habit repeated all day, 3 minutes at a time. Anything that takes less than 3 minutes gets handled the second you notice it. Not later. Not on the list. Right then. That's the entire secret. And I'm about to show you exactly how it works. Here's why this actually beats a Saturday marathon. A messy home was never one big disaster. It's dozens of tiny delays stacked up, the cup left for later, the mail set down for now, the shoes by the door instead of in the cubby. Each one takes seconds to fix in the moment. Left alone for a week, they become the 2-hour job you're dreading every weekend. Danish households essentially refuse to let that debt accumulate in the first place. Quick note, what follows is built from real, documented Danish home habits, filtered through my own professional experience. My interpretation of it, offered for education and entertainment, not a strict formula. I'm Freya Holm, an interior designer from Copenhagen, who spent 8 years organizing homes for urban families, and this exact habit came up in nearly every single one. The calm homes weren't the ones with the most storage. They were the ones where nothing was ever allowed to sit for long enough to become a project. Here's how it actually runs through a day. The counter gets wiped while the kettle boils, not left for later. The bed gets made the moment you're out of it, before your brain has a chance to talk you out of it. Shoes go straight into their spot at the door, not left in a pile that grows by Thursday. A spill gets wiped the second it happens, not in a minute. None of these take more than 3 minutes individually. Most take under 30 seconds. Combined, they replace an entire weekend's worth of cleaning with something so small it barely registers as effort at all. Danish households don't have a single tidy word for this the way they do for hygge. It's just how the house runs, quietly, all day. But the mechanism is the same one behind almost every calm home I've ever organized. Prevention is dramatically cheaper than restoration. A counter wiped daily never needs scrubbing. A drawer that's never allowed to overflow never needs a dedicated decluttering day. The mess you're fighting on a Saturday is the exact same mess that would have taken 6 seconds to handle if you'd caught it the moment it happened. If your house has ever gone from fine to disaster seemingly overnight, this is why. And it's also exactly why the fix isn't a better cleaning schedule. It's catching everything while it's still 3 minutes wide, instead of letting it grow into 2 hours. If this is already reframing how you think about your own Saturdays, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're new here. This channel exists to hand you the real system behind Nordic living, and it genuinely helps to have you here for the rest of it. Let's get into exactly how to build this into a day that already feels too full for one more habit. Let's start with the morning, because this is where I personally resisted the habit longest. For years, my instinct, the second I got out of bed, was to head straight for coffee, leaving the sheets exactly as they were. I'll deal with it later. Felt harmless, just an unmade bed, nothing dramatic. But here's what I actually noticed once I started making the bed, the moment I stood up. It took under a minute. and it changed how the entire room felt every single time I walked back into it that day. The excuse, "It's just going to get messed up again tonight anyway," is technically true and completely beside the point. The bed isn't made for permanence. It's made because a made bed signals the room is currently in order, and that signal resets every time you glance at it all day long. The shift. The moment you're out of bed, before coffee, before your phone, pull the sheets straight. 30 seconds, maybe less. The kitchen counter works the same way, and this is the one I'm proudest of actually sticking with, because it required almost no willpower once I attached it to something I was already doing. While the kettle's boiling, a stretch of 2 or 3 minutes I used to spend standing there doing nothing. I wipe the counter down. Not a deep clean. Just whatever's sitting there. Crumbs, a ring from a mug, a stray utensil. I used to let this build across an entire day, telling myself I'd do a proper wipe down before bed, which meant by evening I was scrubbing something that would have taken 4 seconds that morning. The shift. Attach the counter wipe to something you're already waiting on. The kettle, the toaster, the microwave, so it never requires a separate decision to start. Entryway shoes are the habit I still catch myself failing sometimes, if I'm honest, especially on exhausted evenings when the couch feels more urgent than the shoe rack 3 steps away. But here's what I've noticed on the nights I do manage it versus the nights I don't. One pair of shoes left by the door doesn't look like much, but shoes left by the door compound fast. Within 3 or 4 days, without anyone deciding to let it happen, there's a small pile. And a small pile is somehow much harder to face than one single pair would ever have been. The shift. Shoes go directly into their spot the moment they're off, not just for tonight by the door. It costs the same 3 seconds every single time, whether you do it immediately or eventually. The only difference is whether it ever becomes a pile at all. Mail and small paper clutter is where I actually learned this lesson the hardest way, because it was the habit I resisted most before I finally adopted it. I used to set mail down on the counter to deal with properly later, and later meant a stack. And a stack meant an actual task, sorting, recycling, hunting for one specific envelope buried somewhere in the middle. Once I started opening mail the moment it came through the door, standing right there by the entrance, recycling the envelope immediately, and either filing or discarding the contents on the spot, the entire category of paper clutter essentially disappeared from my home. It wasn't willpower. It was refusing to let the first 30 seconds turn into a 10-minute task 3 weeks later. We're building toward the evening now, because that's really where this whole habit either survives or falls apart for good. And it's the piece that determines whether tomorrow morning starts calm or already behind. The evening version of this habit is the one that matters most, because it determines what tomorrow morning actually looks like. Before I go to bed, I do one final 3-minute pass. Not a cleaning session, just returning anything that's drifted out of place back where it belongs. A book off the nightstand, back on the shelf. A jacket off the chair, back on its hook. Whatever's collected on the kitchen counter over the course of the evening, cleared in the same 30 seconds it would have taken at any earlier point in the day. I used to skip this constantly, telling myself I was too tired, that I'd handle it in the morning instead. And every single time, handling it in the morning actually meant starting the day already behind, cleaning up yesterday before I'd even had coffee, the shift, 3 minutes before bed, no exceptions, even on the exhausted nights, especially on the exhausted nights, because that's exactly when tomorrow's calm morning matters most. I want to be honest about something because I don't think this habit works if I pretend it's effortless. There are still evenings I skip it, and mornings where I walk into a kitchen that looks exactly like I left it, tired, half finished. What's different now isn't that I never fail at this. It's that failing one evening doesn't turn into a failed week anymore, the way it used to when my whole system depended on one big Saturday reset. One missed evening just means one slightly messier morning, not a debt that compounds into 3 hours of cleaning I'll resent doing. Here's the whole thing together. The bed made the moment you're up. The counter wiped while something else is already running. Shoes returned immediately, not set down for now. Mail handled the second it arrives. And a 3-minute evening pass, returning anything that drifted. So tomorrow starts clear instead of already behind. None of these individually feel like cleaning. That's genuinely the entire point. A habit small enough to survive your busiest, most exhausted days is a habit that actually sticks. In a way, a 3-hour Saturday marathon never quite manages to. If your house has ever gone from fine to disaster seemingly overnight, it wasn't one big mess. It was dozens of small 3-minute delays, stacking quietly until Saturday arrived and handed you the bill all at once. You don't need a better cleaning schedule. You need to stop lending yourself the time in the first place. Tell me in the comments which of these you're most likely to actually start tomorrow morning. The bed, the counter, or finally handling the mail the moment it arrives. I read every single comment, and if you know someone who dreads their Saturday cleaning day every single week, send this to them. Sometimes the fix isn't a better system. It's just never letting the mess get the chance to build in the first place. I know this sounds simple on paper, almost suspiciously simple. So let me address the obstacles that actually show up in real homes, because I've heard every version of them organizing other people's spaces for years. If you live with kids, the honest truth is that this habit works differently, not less effectively, just differently. You're not expecting a 5-year-old to independently execute a 3-minute reset. What actually works is attaching the habit to something already happening in their routine. Shoes go in the cubby the moment they're off, framed as part of coming inside, not a separate chore added on top. Toys get one home each, so putting away means one obvious motion instead of a decision about where 15 different things belong. The 3-minute principle still applies. It just gets built into transitions that are already happening, coming inside, before dinner, before bed, rather than treated as a standalone task competing for attention on its own. If you share a home with a partner or roommates who don't practice this the same way, I want to be honest. This is genuinely one of the harder obstacles, and I don't think pretending otherwise helps anyone. What I've seen work isn't lecturing someone into adopting your system. It's making the right place for things so obvious and so close to where they're actually used that putting something away correctly becomes easier than leaving it out. A hook exactly where a jacket gets removed. a bowl exactly where keys land, a shelf exactly at the spot where mail naturally gets carried in. You're not changing another person's habits directly. You're changing the environment, so the easy path and the tidy path happen to be the same path. I also want to talk about the days this habit genuinely fails, because I think most advice like this pretends those days don't exist, and that pretense is exactly what makes people give up entirely the first time they slip. There are evenings I come home completely depleted, and the 3-minute reset simply doesn't happen. I used to treat a missed evening as proof the whole system had failed, which, ironically, is the exact same all-or-nothing thinking that made the Saturday marathon necessary in the first place. What changed for me wasn't willpower. It was lowering what success actually meant on a hard day. On a genuinely exhausted night, success isn't the full reset. It's just the counter, nothing else, or just the shoes. One tiny piece, protected, even when everything else gets skipped. A partial version of this habit, done on a hard day, still prevents most of the compounding that turns into a Saturday disaster. An abandoned version, chased away entirely because it wasn't perfect, doesn't. I think the real reason I hold on to this habit now, more than the tidiness itself, is what it does to how my home feels to walk into, especially after a hard day. There's a specific kind of relief in coming home to a space that isn't quietly accusing you of something. No pile waiting, no mail glaring at you from the counter, no version of yesterday's exhaustion still sitting there unresolved. I didn't fully understand this until I went through a stretch of genuinely difficult months. Work overwhelming, energy low, and noticed that the one thing that didn't collapse alongside everything else was this habit, because it had never depended on having extra energy to begin with. It had always just been 3 minutes, borrowed from moments I was already standing there anyway. That's really the whole argument for why this beats a deep clean beyond the math of it. A 3-hour Saturday session requires you to have 3 good hours available in a row, with enough energy left over to actually want to spend them scrubbing a floor. 3 minutes, scattered across a day you're already living through regardless, requires almost nothing extra at all. It survives your busiest weeks specifically because it was never asking much of you in the first place, even on the days you have the least to give.